Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this open information session for the Yenching Academy of Peking University, with a special focus on the research areas in the humanities. So that includes history and archaeology, literature and culture, and philosophy and religion. My name is Dr. Brent Haas. I'm Associate Dean of the Yenching Academy of Peking University and the Director of Admission Affairs here at YCA. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and try to wrap up my presentation as quickly as possible because tonight we're lucky to have three Yenching scholars who will be joining us, all of whom did their master's thesis research in one of each of the humanities-focused research concentrations. So I want to be sure to give our Yenching scholars enough time to talk about their experiences, including their motivation for applying, their experience in the admission process, the they took, and the way that they were able to develop and carry out their master's thesis research project. We will be leaving question time at the end to answer your questions. Since this is a webinar format, you will not be able to turn on your microphone or your video. Please feel free to type in any questions you might have in the Q&A function located at the bottom of the Zoom app. My colleagues are online with us as well, and they might answer your questions directly in text, or we'll get to them in the order that they were received after all four of the presentations have ended. For your information, we are recording tonight's session, and it will be put up on our website very soon after tonight's session ends. And if you are interested in other research areas for your possible application to the Yenching Academy, we already have 3 videos up on our website. The first on politics and international relations, the second on law and society, and the third on economics and management. Okay, so let's get started. So Peking University, China's best institution of higher education and its oldest modern university, was founded in 1898 as part of a more or less failed reform program under the second to last emperor of the Qing dynasty, the Guangxu Emperor. Although this so-called 100 Days of Reform ended up being a short-term failure, one of the lasting institutional legacies of this reform movement was the foundation of the Jingshi Daxuetang, the original name of Peking University. On the right in the slide, you can see PKU's famous West Gate. And if it calls to mind palatial Chinese architecture, that makes sense because a large portion of what is now Peking University's campus was originally built as a part of a summer palace complex for the Qing dynasty emperors, ruling house, and their family. Here you can see some of the other lovely shots of mainly autumn around PKU's campus. I don't want to spend much time on this except to point out the central slide. That photograph is of Jingyuan, a lovely grassy area in the central western portion of Peking University's campus. Peking University today has over 8,200 faculty members that are separated into 49 different schools and departments. These 8,200 faculty members mentor 43,000 full-time students and just under 2,800 international students per year. Yenching Academy is incredibly fortunate to have the full support of the administration, faculty, and staff of Peking University. So the Yenching Academy of Peking University is a 2-year, fully funded master's program in China studies. We're building an institute for the study of contemporary China and its changing role in the world. Now, having run the admission cycle for over a year, as well as having gotten to know current and former Yenching scholars, I can personally attest to the fact that we really are a magnet for truly outstanding young scholars from all over the globe, many of whom will go on to being leaders in whatever field they eventually choose. Now, we're part of an interesting experiment of bringing the best practices of interdisciplinary teaching and training our scholars in interdisciplinary research methods and fitting interdisciplinarity into the higher education system at the graduate level established by the rules and regulations of the Ministry of Education of the PRC. And this last talking point here sounds the most talking pointy of all of them on this slide, but I can personally attest, and I'll certainly bet that many Yenching scholars would agree that whether you're in classrooms or in the dormitory or in the cafeteria or strolling around campus, being in a truly diverse, multinational, multicultural academic community, yet sharing similar interests, the research and study of China, really does lead to discussions, debates, and cross-cultural and multinational dialogue. It's a very, very special and unique, diverse academic community. So the Yenching Academy is a residential college graduate program. And what that means is in your first year, all Yenching scholars are required to live together in the Yenching Academy House, our dormitory. Scholars from mainland China, as well as the regions of Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, are required to be in Beijing for both years of our 2-year master's program. International scholars, however, are not required to be in Beijing for the second year. They are, however, strongly encouraged to spend both years in Beijing, really just to get a better sense of the Yenching Academy community, to get to know the incoming first-year Yenching scholars when they are a second-year student, to become more integrated into Peking University's campus culture, and get to know Beijing and China a little bit better in that second year. The language of instruction at Yenching Academy, as well as the language of administration, is in English. So no previous Chinese language proficiency is required for admission. That having been said, we are a China Studies graduate program, so we certainly value applicants who have previous training in Chinese language or previous focus in China Studies, or perhaps experience traveling, living, or studying abroad in China. Again, not required, but if this is something that is in your academic or professional profile, we encourage you to include that and emphasize it in your application to the program. And we designed our curriculum to encourage and in some ways push Yenching scholars out of our own classes and into courses taught in other departments and schools at Peking University. For most of our students, that will be courses taught in English, and there are plenty of them on campus. But for those who have already achieved a level of fluency in Chinese or are native Chinese speakers, then we also strongly encourage you to take courses in another subject taught in Chinese. So let's talk money. The Yenching Fellowship is quite a generous fellowship package for your first and second year in the program. First year scholars receive tuition, free accommodation in the Yenching Academy House, our dormitory on campus, a monthly stipend for living expenses of 3,000 renminbi, which last time I checked was about 450, 460 US dollars. For the first year, you receive a round-trip travel stipend from your home city to Beijing, and at the end of the first year, back to your home city. And scholars also receive basic medical insurance. This is Chinese medical insurance designed specifically for international students living and studying in China. Now, in the second year at Yenching Academy, after you've finished all of your coursework, there are some more options for you. Funding options include, on a competitive basis, teaching assistantships, research assistantships, residence assistantships, and office assistantships. This allows Yenching scholars to contribute to the Yenching Academy community in a different way, as well as have a little bit more funding for their living expenses and research activities. In the second year, scholars are allowed to live off campus in Beijing. And if they choose to do so, they can receive a housing stipend of about 3,000 renminbi per month. This housing stipend is sufficient for renting a private room in a shared apartment, but due to the rising and generally high rental rates in Beijing, probably not enough to find your own apartment just for yourself. Now, if an international scholar chooses to be outside of China for the second year, again, we encourage everyone to stay in Beijing and in China for their second year. But if a research opportunity or an internship opportunity, or perhaps just life necessitates that you're not based in China, you can still receive a partial Yenching Fellowship for the second year. If you are not in China, you can receive your tuition payment and a monthly living expense stipend. Housing and the medical insurance for living in China will not be provided. And also, no second year scholars receive the round trip travel package to and from Beijing. Now, this is a very large investment that we at the Academy are making in each individual scholar and on whole, about 120 scholars per year. So at the end of the first year, we have an academic review process. This academic review is part of the application for the second year fellowship. There are some minimum academic performance standards that all first-year scholars must meet. These are clearly laid out in the student handbook, academic handbook, and in our orientation. So when you reapply for this, when you apply for the second year scholarship, as long as you have maintained a certain minimum GPA, have not failed any core required courses, then you will receive the second year fellowship. So this is just something that we reserve the right to make sure you're performing up to our high standards in order to be funded again for the second year. That having been said, meet those standards, you will be funded for the second year. So we are a fully funded 2-year master's program. This is an important slide that I want to talk a little bit about, and we'll come back to this topic a couple of times in my presentation. These are the research areas at the Yenching Academy. We are an interdisciplinary master's program. So once you're here, you, in consultation with your faculty advisor, can pick any course in any subject as long as you and your advisor think it is helpful to you as you prepare for your second year master's thesis. So you are not restricted to only taking courses in literature and culture if you apply to literature and culture. But these 6 research areas are important in 3 ways. First, when you apply to the Yenching Academy, you choose one of these research areas. We will, in addition to looking at your entire academic, professional, internship, extracurricular profile, we will be looking into your academic transcript, your record, any papers you've written, courses you've taken, internship experience, etc., with an eye to evaluating your training for conducting graduate level research in the research area that you choose when you apply. We'll talk more about this coming up later. The second way that this research area is important for your time at Yenching Academy and your academic progression is the way that Peking University evaluates master's theses. So the process for completing your master's thesis is as follows. First, you finish your draft and your thesis advisor must approve the final draft of the thesis as being ready for defense. Then you have an oral defense of your master's thesis with your thesis advisor and multiple Peking University faculty members. They will question you on your theoretical approach, your methodology, your analysis of the data, your writing, etc. So it is an interesting but challenging oral defense of your thesis. And then finally, in order to be considered complete and fully ready to advance to graduation, Peking University will assign 2 faculty members from a field that you have chosen or adjacent to that field to do a read of your final thesis paper to assess whether or not it meets the standards of the discipline and whether or not it makes a contribution to that discipline within the expectations of a master's level thesis. Once that is approved, then your thesis is complete. And then finally, when you graduate, your master's diploma will have this research area on it. So if you choose literature and culture, research concentration, your master's thesis will say Peking University, Master of Literature, China Studies, Literature and Culture. Or Peking University, Master of Philosophy, China Studies, Philosophy and Religion. Or Peking University, Master of History, China Studies, History and Archeology. I don't want to go too much more into that detail, but it's because the way China has set up its accreditation for diplomas and areas of academic inquiry. So your master's degree will be in Master of History, your research area will be China Studies, History and Archeology, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I want to briefly go over the required courses that all first-year Yenching scholars must take. China in Transition 1 and 2 is a 2-semester course that is an interdisciplinary look at contemporary China. The first semester is structured around large lectures that all Yenching scholars attend together, taught by different faculty from schools and departments at Peking University. This is combined with a teaching assistant-led discussion section that immediately follows the large lecture or symposium or debate or discussion among the faculty members. Each discussion section is going to be about 15 to 20 students. China in Transition 2 narrows the focus from the first semester into a field research training course. So scholars will choose a course in China in Transition 2 taught by one PKU faculty member in a research area that they're interested in exploring in more depth. That faculty member will assist you in designing a research project, conducting your field research, and writing an independent research paper. An added benefit of China in Transition 2 is that you will have on-the-ground field research experience in the PRC in preparation for conducting your master's thesis research in the second year. Now, field study, somewhat confusingly, is a mandatory course. It is a very intensive academic travel experience that all first-year Yenching scholars, most of our faculty and staff, go on for a long week, generally in around November of the fall semester. So for the first 4 years, we took scholars to Xi'an, a metropolis in northwestern China in Shanxi province. Last year, we took scholars to Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province in the southwest. Yes, you go visit some must-see tourist sites and engage in some cultural activities, but you also meet with local faculty and experts at universities in the area, network with local graduate students, go to sites of archaeological and cultural significance, go to high-tech centers, or go visit leading representatives of the industries or businesses in the area that have decisively shaped that region's economy. So it's designed to not only take your learning outside of the classroom, but also to take the classroom outside of Beijing. We also have a Topic in China Studies lecture series. This is a year-long course where we bring in about 13, 14, 15 leaders in a different field, broadly defined as China studies. So they might be business leaders, prominent academics, artists, cultural figures, etc., to come in and give about an hour and a half lecture and then a half an hour or so of lively discussion and Q&A with our scholars. This course culminates in a series of short reaction papers. Academic writing is another year-long course that is a seminar or lecture format where we bring in faculty members from Peking University to tell you about, sort of train you in thinking about and improving your process for designing, carrying out, and writing up your master's thesis research. This course culminates in the formal submission of your master's thesis research proposal that will guide your work for the second year. All international scholars at Yenching Academy must take Chinese language courses. These will be 4 hours of classes per week, plus 2 hours of one-on-one language tutorial with a graduate student from the PKU School of Teaching Chinese as a Second Language. If you are advanced in Chinese or fluent as a non-native speaker, indicated by your successful completion of the HSK Level 6, the highest level of the mainland Chinese standardized test for Chinese proficiency for non-native speakers. If you have an HSK Level 6, you can place out of the Chinese language courses, but you are required to fulfill those 31 academic credits, to fulfill the language courses, the language academic credits, in order to reach your academic requirement of 31 academic credits for the full first year. If you are a native Chinese speaker from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, you are required to take a second foreign language, a non-English foreign language. On the fall field study, this academic travel experience, you can see some of the kinds of cultural events and activities that Yenching scholars participate in. Chinese shadow puppetry in Xi'an, or learning Sichuan opera at a tea house in Chengdu. And this is an exciting slide because in the China in Transition Part 2, the spring semester field study that is taught and guided by PKU faculty, you will be funded by the Yenching Academy to travel to a different region in China and conduct your course required field research project. You can see that in 2019, we had 30 different groups of Yenching scholars, all as a part of this course, visit 15 different provinces or cities or regions around China as part of the field research component of China in Transition 2. We also have funding for independent field research in your first year, as known as the Dean's Research Grant. Scholars, either in small groups or individually, write a formal research proposal that is reviewed, and if we think it is an interesting project, it is practical in the first year of a master's program and makes a contribution to the field, we then fund you to conduct this research in your first year outside of your coursework. So the required courses that I showed you a few slides ago are about 40 to 45% of the total number of academic credits you must complete in your first year. That leaves more than half of your academic credits for elective courses. So in broadly defined humanities, you can see on the left some of the elective courses taught by Yenching Academy that our scholars have traditionally taken broadly in the field of history and archaeology, literature and culture, or philosophy and religion. On the right, you can see elective courses that Yenching scholars have frequently taken in other departments and schools at Peking University. Now, these are just a tiny selection of the elective courses in the humanities that are available to you. Of course, like any university or graduate program, you won't know for sure what's being offered until it's time to select your courses for the upcoming semester. Because some faculty are on leave, or maybe they're not teaching the course every semester that you're here. And if you are a native Chinese speaker or you have an HSK level 6 as a non-native speaker, there are many, many other courses for you to take taught in Chinese. And here's a tiny, tiny selection of the kinds of master's thesis topics that Yenching scholars have completed over the last several years in the broadly defined humanities. So you can see China's multiculturalism, one on Chinese science fiction novels, a biographical study of one woman from the Qing dynasty, Mencius and empirical psychology, etc. So this is just a tiny slice of the kinds of master's theses that Yenching scholars in the humanities tend to work on. We also really try to focus on career development and training for Yenching scholars, specifically those who maybe aren't interested in going in for further academic study upon graduation. So through our colleagues in the Student Affairs Office, we bring in leading figures in industries or in international development, et cetera, to come to Yenching Academy and give voluntary extracurricular discussions or meetings or lectures to share some of their experiences in their careers. We often have a lot of organizations and companies come to recruit Yenching scholars for internship opportunities or for employment opportunities after their graduation. Here you can see one of the vice presidents of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank talking to interested Yenching scholars. Internships are a big pastime and a big focus of Yenching scholars, just like at any top university around the world. In the first year, you are not allowed to do off-campus internships. You'll be too busy. But in the summer after your first year, when your coursework ends, and in your second year, we support and encourage you to find an internship opportunity that works for you. Here you can see some of the Chinese corporations going global, multinationals in China, consultancies, international organizations where Yenching scholars have found productive internship experiences in their second year. After the program, Yenching scholars have great success in finding productive next steps in their career, whether it's going on to further graduate study, perhaps at the doctoral level, law school, med school on the left, or if it's going directly into the next step of their professional career. You can see some of the companies, the international organizations, consultancies, et cetera, where Yenching scholars have gone after graduation. It's about 30% of Yenching scholar graduates who go on to further graduate study, often at the doctoral level. And on the left, those are just a few of the top universities where scholars have gone on for further study. Our highlight extracurricular event is the Yenching Global Symposium that generally takes place in late March of the spring semester. This is a highly competitive, fully funded global China studies conference that is completely designed, organized, and administered by Yenching scholars themselves. So here you can see some of the themes, the first 4 years of the Yenching Global Symposium. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the 2020 version of YGS because I think you all remember what was happening around the world in late March of 2020. But the 2021 YGS is already being organized. by our current cohort of scholars. Whether it will be online, fully offline, or a combination of the two remains to be seen. So in terms of demographic data and country or region of origin, here you can get a sense of just how diverse the community of Yenching scholars has been over the first 6 cohorts at YCA. About 40% from Asia, about a quarter from North America, just under a quarter from Europe, and about 12% from Africa, Latin America, and Oceania. Of course, we're always hoping to increase our regional representation. A lot of that has to do with building up mutually beneficial and productive partnerships with the top institutions of higher education in those regions. So over the first 6 cohorts of Yenching scholars, we've had scholars from just under 300 universities worldwide. Here you can see just a selection of some of the famous universities that have sent scholars to the Yenching Academy. Okay, now we're back to the research concentration. And as you can see here, significantly the most popular research concentrations over the first 6 years have been politics and international relations and economics and management. Law and society comes in third at about 15%. And then the humanities, literature and culture, history and archaeology, philosophy and religion, each its own research area, makes up just about 15% as well. I want to highlight for you and stress that we do not prefer one research area over the other. This imbalance that you see in research concentrations chosen by Yenching scholars is simply a reflection of the research area that year's most competitive applicants chose. So we do not have a quota, and your research area will not be the decisive factor in whether you get in or don't get in. Your preparation for that research area is important, however. So in terms of application strategies, you want to be able to show to us that you have training and skills to get into a competitive graduate program and conduct research in this research area after you're accepted. I am not saying at all that you must apply to the research area that you've already majored in or already have a degree in, not at all. But you should, if say you are applying to literature and culture, but your undergraduate research area was neuroscience, well, that, at least on the surface, seems like a very big switch in your academic focus. Now, this is an extreme example, but if you think your undergraduate training and your selected research area in your application to Yenching Academy on the surface will appear to be a big change, anticipate that we might have questions about that and try to, in your application materials, address to us how you do in fact have training that prepares you for graduate study in that research area. So in general, most Yenching scholars' highest level of academic attainment before they arrive here is a bachelor's degree. Although every year we do have a significant number of Yenching scholars, maybe a quarter, maybe a third, who already have a master's degree or a graduate degree like a law degree. So you can get a sense of the breakdown of those with bachelor's and those with master's or other graduate degrees when they come in. So, having a graduate degree when you apply here is not necessarily a distinct advantage. It's more about the entire story and profile that you show us when you're applying. Why do you want to study China in China now? What have you done to prepare yourself for this? How have you demonstrated your interest in China and multicultural educational experiences? Where do you want to go? How would Yenching Academy fit into your achieving your career goals, etc.? So it can be an advantage for you, but it's not necessarily an advantage. Okay, now I'm going to be wrapping up very soon, but I want to talk a little bit about what we're looking for in prospective applicants. First, we need an outstanding academic record. We are a highly competitive, fully funded master's program in China's top university. So academic excellence is required. But it's not the only thing that we look for. If you've spent a lot of time and effort in your undergraduate career, focused on extracurricular activities? Like, do you have a startup company? Are you focused on community service? Were you in student leadership or student government? Are you an athlete, an artist, a musician? These are the kinds of things that we want to hear about because it'll help us get a better understanding of each individual applicant. And it's a way for you to tell us that if accepted, what kind of contribution can you make to our student community that maybe someone else can't make? Since we are so diverse, we do appreciate students who have experience in or a significant interest or passion in multicultural education and multicultural environments. And we are a China Studies graduate program, so we value applicants who have a sustained interest in or training in or a passion for learning more about China. Now, you don't have to be a fully formed or an almost formed China academic. You don't have to have majored in East Asian literature and minored in Chinese language in order to be accepted. You don't have to be a so-called China nerd at this point in your stage. Of course, we hope that by the time you leave, you will be a fully formed China nerd, but we do welcome students who have that profile of sustained academic training, experience, and interest in China. But also every year we have a significant portion of accepted Yenching scholars who excel in another field. And at this point, maybe the end of their undergraduate career or after working for a couple of years, realize that China is important to what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And so those students who are also excellent, just in a non-China related field, make a sort of lateral movement where they take their experience, their academic training in another field, and take some of the lessons that they've learned, some of the questions that they've asked, and try to apply that knowledge to the situation in China. That is also a very persuasive and frequently successful profile for applicants to Yenching Academy. And just like any, job or graduate program or internship or undergraduate, college application, you need to tell us why Yenching? What about the program interests you? Why do you want to study China in China? And why do you want to do this at this point in your life and at this point in your career? We want to know where you hope to go in your career and how 2 years of China studies at Yenching Academy and a master's degree from Peking University can help you achieve those goals. Okay, some details about the application process. Because of Ministry of Education regulations, and Peking University rules and regulations as well, there are slightly different application procedures depending on one's citizenship or regional origin. First, for mainland Chinese students, PRC citizens, the only way to apply and be accepted to the Yenching Academy is through the exemption from the National Postgraduate Entrance Examination, so 推免资格. And you have to get that by attending a mainland Chinese university, performing at a high standard, and being recommended by your school or department for 推免 to skip the National Graduate Entrance Examination system. Unfortunately, PRC citizens who studied abroad or who did their undergraduate work abroad are not eligible to apply at this time. If you are from the regions of Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, there is an extra application step with the same deadline as the Yenching Academy's application deadline. This extra step is applying directly through Peking University's specific application portal for residents of Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. Please, if that applies to you, go to our website immediately and make sure you're clear about this extra application procedure. If you are a candidate from one of Yenching Academy's partner universities, and we have 71, now maybe 72 partner universities listed on our website. If you're from one of our partner universities, you must apply first to your partner university. They conduct the first round of admission review and then nominate scholars to the Yenching Academy, who then enter our admissions process in the second round. The minimum for anyone to be considered for admission to Yenching Academy is completing your bachelor's degree no later than the end of August of next year, August 31st, 2021. The deadline for applying to the Yenching Academy and for residents of Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan to complete the PKU online application is December 4th, 2020. And I want to specify that's 12 p.m., 12 noon Beijing time. So be sure to check your clocks and make sure you know the time difference from where you are and Beijing. If you are a non-native English speaker and you did not attend a university or graduate program where the only language of instruction was English, then we will need to see your certificate of English proficiency, IELTS, TOEFL, Cambridge, etc. We will need to see diplomas from any institutions of higher education that you have already graduated from. Or if you are in your final year of university, of your bachelor's program, we will need to see an official university document that certifies you are a student and that you are on progress to graduate no later than August of next year. We will need to see official academic transcripts from all institutions of higher education you've attended. So your undergraduate, and if you have a graduate degree, we will need to see official transcripts. We need to have a personal statement in English, no more than 750 words. This is introducing who you are, why you want to study at Yenching Academy, what makes you unique, how you can contribute to our community of Yenching scholars, why where you want to go in your career, and how you think studying with us and graduating from PKU can help you achieve those goals. This year, we have a new application requirement, and this is a research proposal. This research proposal is a maximum of 1 page. And in this, you need to balance 2 things. First, you need to show us how you are prepared to conduct research in this field. And you need to tell us what questions you hope to answer, what problems confound you and fascinate you, and how do you maybe propose trying to answer those questions or solve those problems. It can be a formal research proposal, but not everyone already knows what they want to study for their master's degree research project. And I want to emphasize your research proposal in the application process does not necessarily have to be what your final master's thesis ends up becoming. We don't expect that. Consider this the first communication in a more than 2-year-long discussion about your research interests in China studies. But balance your training and your erudition in this field with your passion and your curiosity, telling us what it is that you want to learn more about. We want to see your resume, CV, resume, and then we need 2 letters of recommendation. And here are some important rules about this. Both must be academic letters of reference, and both must come from recommenders who are either associate professors or the equivalent, or full professors or the equivalent, or higher. So we realize that not every university system has assistant, associate, full professor. We know the different equivalents for those positions, but they must be from academic letter references, and they must be from the associate or full professor level. These are Peking University regulations and the standard practice for all top-level graduate programs in China. If you have other letters, maybe from an internship supervisor, or a supervisor in one of your jobs, or from a lecturer or a assistant professor, if you think it'll be really helpful, we welcome you submitting those. They just must be submitted as supplemental documents, and they cannot replace the 2 formal academic references. Okay, last slide and a few pointers. First, go to our website. Look at our application process, learn more about it, look at our curriculum, look at the faculty members here, and most importantly, look at the profiles of current and former Yenching scholars. On the one hand, I hope it'll be inspirational for you. On the other hand, I hope you'll see that we are not a one-size-fits-all master's degree program. And we are not looking for one single type or one single profile of successful applicants. You can see people from all over the world, all different kinds of academic training, different universities, different regions, different internship experiences, different motivations for coming here. And I hope you can see that if you can show us your commitment to China studies at the graduate level, your confidence in who you are and what makes you unique, and your charisma, convince us, then you do have a good shot at being successful. So please do those things. If you can't find answers to your question in today's seminar or in today's online info session or on our website, please feel free to reach out to us at yca-admissions@pku.edu.cn. And if you're using WeChat, you can scan that QR code on the right-hand side of the screen and 关注一下我们的公众号. So follow our official WeChat account and keep up with what's going on at YCA now. So that is all I have for you right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let's see here. Coming up next, we have a 2018 cohort Yenching scholar, Michael Collins, who's going to grab the mic and tell you a little bit about his experiences here in the program. And I will go ahead and turn off my my video to let Michael shine through, and I'll start looking at some of the Q&A. So thanks for joining us, Michael. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really excited to speak with everyone today. To my friends in the Americas, congratulations on waking up early for this presentation. Let me just share my screen.
Uh-oh, I think we just lost Michael. So perhaps while Michael is re-signing in, Jacob, are you ready and able to hop on and give us your presentation? All right, so Jacob, when you're sharing your screen, hopefully you won't be disconnected from Zoom.
Yeah, let's hope not. Good morning, everyone. If it is morning for you, I'll try to share my screen. Okay, let's see. I think that's working. And there we go. Okay, so that's me. My name's Jacob Colman. If you read the bio, I'm from Casper, Wyoming, United States. And I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts, double majoring in philosophy and Asian languages and civilizations. Prior to YCA, I had experience working in government and in an education consulting firm in Beijing. But I wanted to sort of shift from philosophy to art history and the philosophy of art, and which is what I've done at Yenching. And I'm currently working for an art advisory firm focusing on blue chip, post-war, and contemporary art, which has been a lot of fun. So my motivations for applying to YCA, I had studied Chinese art and philosophy in college, but a lot of it was through sort of self-designed courses with language professors, and I wanted to dive deeper and study it with leading academics in these fields. I had been studying Chinese for about 2.5 or 3 years, but I wanted to keep improving my Chinese language skills. And I wanted to meet scholars from all over the world, from different countries and cultures. And although I had already lived in Beijing for a few years, I wanted to keep exploring Beijing because it's so big and diverse that you can never really stop exploring. And my experience as a Yenching scholar, I'm still finishing my master's thesis, so process is still ongoing, but so far it's been really incredible. There's been a lot of academic flexibility, which has been really nice for me. Even in the required courses like China in Transition, I found opportunities to sort of fit what we were studying in class to my specific interests in contemporary art or art history. I met amazing classmates and friends from all over the world. There were a bunch of great student clubs, and I was on the executive committee for the art club and film club. And like Dr. Haas was saying in his presentation, there are frequent field trips and travel opportunities to amazing cities like Chengdu, and also some lesser known historical sites, which were really insightful and a lot of fun. There were great lectures with leaders in different fields, and my favorite from last year was with Chinese contemporary artist Xu Bing. That one was really incredible and also just very inspirational. And finally, I think Beijing is probably the most fun and convenient city I've ever lived in. I'm very sad that I left in January, but hopefully I'll get to go back soon. So my experience in the literature and culture research track has been extremely rewarding, and like I was saying earlier, it's given me a lot of flexibility. So as you can see on the left column, these are courses taught at Yenching, and some of them are required courses like China in Transition. Critical Conceptions in Chinese Thought might have had a different name in Dr. Haas's slide, but we're studying different classics from Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, and talking about how they developed throughout Chinese history. And then on the right column, Art of China is also a Yenching class, but I took art criticism fall semester. I audited it, and that course was taught in Chinese, so it was a great opportunity not only to practice my Chinese language skills, but to also dive deeper into the history and development of art criticism in the West and in China. And then in the spring, I took Chinese aesthetics through PKU, which is also taught in Chinese and is very directly related to my master's thesis. So my current thesis is evaluating Chinese aesthetics and philosophy of art, and using it to comment on or critique the dominant narratives in Western art history, the most important one being post-historical art from Arthur Danto. And so I plan to finish that next spring, and I'm currently working with my advisor remotely, and we've been communicating over WeChat and setting up video calls. So even though I'm not in Beijing, I feel very supported by my advisor, and I'm still able to engage deeply with this research. And then other related work that happened while I was in Beijing, my thesis advisor is actually an art curator in his free time, and he is connected to a lot of other figures in the Beijing art world. And one of his former students produced an independent feature-length film, and it was a mockumentary about the contemporary art industry in China. And the film was in Chinese, and so I was invited to help them translate it into English. And so it was sort of my first big translation project, and it was a lot of fun, and the film was really entertaining, and I got to see it screened at Peking University and at the 798 Art District. And recently, the film was the winner of the Spirit of Freedom Award at the first film festival in Xining. So again, my insights into the literature and culture research track. First is that you have a lot of academic flexibility. And so, like Dr. Haas was saying earlier, even if you are studying literature and culture, you are able to take classes from any of the research tracks at Yenching. So I took courses in history and philosophy, and I was able to tailor those specifically to what I wanted to focus on in my thesis. Additionally, you have the ability to work with faculty on extracurricular projects. So I know a lot of classmates did research trips with faculty, or perhaps did other projects with their academic advisors. And then I was able to do that film translation project with my academic and now thesis advisor. So it's a great opportunity to delve deeper into a specific area and to get to know and make connections with people around campus. And there's also opportunities to audit or take PKU courses. This, I think, is an amazing opportunity, especially if you have some Chinese language experience. I just think you have so many more doors open to you. But if you don't, there are also a lot of really great English taught courses in PKU and at Yenching. So no matter what your sort of specific interests are, or no matter what you want to explore, you will probably be able to find a course through either Yenching or PKU that fits those interests. So I've been completely satisfied and fulfilled at Yenching. I've been able to study exactly what I wanted, despite it being a sort of niche topic. I picked an advisor who shares my specific interests. I was able to write my final papers in most of my courses relating to my interests in art history and philosophy of art, even if the broader theme of the course wasn't necessarily related to that. And yeah, I think I've succeeded in my goal of diving deeper into Chinese art history and the philosophy of art. So my suggestions to applicants, I would answer 3 questions, and Dr. Haas already talked about these a little bit, so I won't go on too long, but I would answer why China, why Yenching, and why you, and I guess also why now. But I think whether or not you have been studying China or have years of Chinese language experience, or you have never studied China or Chinese language before, I would try to figure out why you want to focus on China going forward, why you think Yenching would be the best place for you to focus on China in your specific field, and how you will contribute to both the Yenching community, but also contribute to your research area or your academic or professional field. So to wrap up, I think Yenching is really a very unique experience. I think the academic flexibility was much more than I was expecting, and it was really helpful in tailoring things to my specific interests. I met people from all over the world, and I was able to sort of glean different perspectives in class on China and on my specific research interests, from people from different cultures, different research backgrounds. And so I learned a lot, not only from the coursework, but from my classmates. So I think if you know clearly what you want to get from Yenching, that you can't get from other programs, so you don't have to necessarily know what like what your specific research project will be. But I think if you know why you want to be a part of this more sort of flexible, diverse international program, and are able to articulate that, I think you'll have a really strong application. And I think if you know that early on, you'll be able to dive right in as soon as you get to campus, and make the experience as fulfilling as possible. So I'm wishing you all the best of luck, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, depending on where you are. But yeah, that's my presentation. I'll give the screen back over.
All right, thanks so much, Jacob. Couple of points that I'd like to follow up in there. One, congrats on the film that you worked on being screened at the first film festival in Xining. I conducted my PhD dissertation research in Xining in 2007 to 2008. I'm pretty sure there weren't any film festivals there at the time, so I'm happy to see that Xining is growing. Also, I thought it was a really good point to follow up that you audited courses in Chinese at Peking University. That option is also available for all Yenching scholars, and it's also a really great option to take advantage of if you have some good Chinese, but you don't have an HSK 6, or even if you do have an HSK 6, if you're a little concerned about taking courses in Chinese. If you're at HSK level 6, you are, for all intents and purposes, professionally fluent. So in that situation, understanding the lectures, no problem. Reading the assigned readings in Chinese, no problem. Interacting with your classmates and professors at a professional academic level, that's also doable too. But being graded in your papers and exams written in Chinese is potentially challenging because you are with literally the smartest graduate students in China. So I encourage you to all think about, if you have at least high intermediate or low advanced Chinese, auditing courses in Chinese. It's a great way to learn, and it's also a great way to get to know professors whose research you're interested in and potentially cultivate relationships with them to be either your formal thesis advisor or just more of an informal academic advisor at the university. So that's very, very good strategy as well. Okay, Michael, are you ready?
We'll try this again. Sorry,
All right.
everyone, for that.
Okay, well, take it away.
All right, so share. There we go. One step closer. Alrighty, so hi everyone, my name is Michael Collins. I, as was previously said, my area of concentration was, or I guess is history and archaeology. I was a part of the 2018 cohort. I'm from the US. I studied Chinese language and culture in my undergraduate school. And before coming to Yenching, I would say kind of my major work or extracurricular experience, I worked as a researcher at a public interest law firm in Beijing, focusing on migrant workers' rights and child protection law. While I was at Yenching, I continued working at the public interest law firm. And during my second year, I decided to return back to the US, and I got a job at the Council on Foreign Relations, where I still work as a researcher for Dr. Elizabeth Economy. And although my concentration was in history, my current research focus is more on Chinese global health diplomacy, traditional Chinese medicine, and Chinese global governance. My motivations for applying to Yenching, I think the main one was, for me as a student of Chinese in the US, I really wanted to take classes on China, in China, with leading Chinese experts. And as has already been mentioned, one of the big parts of the courses is this independent study element to them. And a lot of the courses, as part of them, have a like field trip or field study portion. So in one of my courses on art history, we went to see these famous Buddhist cave art. In another course that I took on like the development of Chinese civilization, we went to Chengdu and saw Taoist sculptures that were relevant to a reading that we were doing. So I'd say that was my principal reason for applying. A secondary reason that I applied was the cohort experience. In undergrad, I'd been a part of a few different cohort scholarships, and the idea of being able to have a community of practice where everyone is similarly interested, but with a diverse group of people with diverse research interests was something that really motivates me to be my best self. And so if I had the opportunity to do that in a master's program, I definitely wanted to continue doing that. Another reason was the emphasis on self-direction. The courses at YCA and at PKU are fantastic, and I think the main reason for that is because the coursework is obviously the foundational level, but as has been previously said, when it comes to paper writing or the research that you conduct in there, the professors allow you a lot of latitude in pursuing your own independent research projects. And so whether the course is on sociology or demography or history, if you're able to tailor that course's content to your research interests, the professors were more than happy to work with you on that. And then finally, I was really interested in further integrating myself into PKU and Beijing. I'd previously taken courses at PKU and lived in Beijing, but YCA has a strong emphasis on being a part of the community. And that was something that I thought was really great. As a master's program in China, I think that you should really be in China. And so then for the history and archaeology courses I took at YCA, I would say kind of the top four that relate to the coursework was development of Chinese civilization, and the name kind of implies this broad sweeping course, but in reality, it was much more of a case-by-case study of a few important figures or a few important periods, and then critical perspectives on modern Sino-Western relations. And this was a fantastic course with Professor Li Chen, who, if you're familiar with kind of history, he won the Levinson Prize a few years ago, and even though he wasn't in China, he was in Canada. It was my favorite course by far. And then modern Chinese history with Dr. Joseph Escherick. Again, if you're familiar with history, he is this seminal figure in the field. And so to be able to take a course with him was a dream come true. And then art of China. And so while at Yenching, I would say I spent the majority of my outside of class time on research, just because in going forward in my career, I want to be a researcher. And so as Dr. Haas mentioned, one of the highlights of Yenching is being able to apply for independent research grants. And so I, along with another YCA scholar in my cohort, Kelsey Kaywood, applied for a Dean's Research Grant and received it. And we did a case study of how China uses traditional Chinese medicine in its health diplomacy efforts. And so as a part of that, we traveled to Shanghai to interview some practitioners. We carried out interviews with practitioners from Korea, Japan, the US, Canada, all over. And then ultimately we traveled to Oxford in the UK to present our research at an academic conference, which was a really stellar experience that the grant made possible with its funding. And then as part of our China in Transition independent study, I looked at the development of China's social credit systems, just to kind of debunk some of the myths of what it isn't, and to really look at conceptions of what citizenship looks like in China and how the social credit systems inform that development. And for that, I worked with a group of other scholars, but we also worked closely with PKU professors, Beijing municipal government officials. We traveled to Nanjing for that and worked with some government officials there who were working on the social credit systems. So it was a really fantastic experience to kind of break out of the academic side of YCA and look at the more practical side of our research. And then finally, for my thesis, which I'm defending in 5 days. I am writing on the Chinese participation in the global anarchist movement, looking at the period of 1900 to 1940. And for this, I really wanted to challenge existing historical narratives around Chinese anarchism. And so I worked really closely with my academic advisor and now thesis advisor, Professor Wang Qisheng, and we used archival sources in China, but also because my primary native language is English, we used archival resources in the US and in Canada and the UK to look at the widespread of how the Chinese diaspora played a large role in the labor movements and anarchist movements in a variety of countries. But aside from working with my thesis advisor, the thesis process is a truly interdisciplinary process. And so I pulled from the coursework that I did in sociology, economics, demographics, women's studies, and worked with professors at PKU in a variety of departments outside of history to really inform this process. And so I would say the research component and the independent study component of YCA really is the strongest piece of it. I would say the YCA cohort is a very diverse cohort, but a common thread that runs through it is a really independent-minded group of people who, even though they might not know what they want to do before they come to YCA, once they get there, they kind of hit the ground running and really take the opportunity or take advantage of all the opportunities that are offered to them. Yeah, in conclusion, definitely apply for the program. The people make the program. I miss them every day. I made some of the best friends that I still keep in contact with. And yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Michael. Really appreciate your presentation. A couple of things that I would like to follow up on and mention. How about you go ahead and stop sharing your screen?
Oh, sure.
One, I'm so glad that you were able to take the course with Professor Eschrich. Yes, it is a joy to take classes with him. Professor Eschrich was one of my 2 PhD advisors in modern Chinese history at the University of California, San Diego. And I co-taught the course with him in the spring of 2020 online, Nationalism and Chinese Identity in Modern Chinese History. And we plan on him coming back again in the spring of 2021. So that's really great. And yeah, like I always love seeing, Chinese historians here with us. Of course, we do not prefer any of the research areas at all, but it's always fun to geek out with students who are China nerds like myself. So excellent, really appreciate your presentation there. Are we ready? Sandile, are you ready to come in next?
Hello?
Hello. Okay, why don't you take it away and you can do the presentation now. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly and we can see your screen now.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandile Dlamini from the Kingdom of eSwatini, Swaziland. So I'm very happy to share my story with you all today. So I'm currently studying at doing my master's in Chinese philosophy and religion at Peking University. But I would like to start sharing more about my story, my education and work experience before joining Yenching and why I applied to the Yenching Academy. So I studied at African Leadership Academy. It's an institution based in Johannesburg in South Africa with a very important vision for the African continent, which is to develop the next generation of African leaders. So in my class, we had about almost 50% students from females and males selected from all over the African continent. And it was in this institution that I started developing a passion for China. And I realized that China's growth over the past past 4 decades, and China's interest in Africa is very important for the future of this continent. And we need to understand how best to deal with China. And I wanted to take that journey to say, how can I commit my life into understanding China? And as a result of, I have lived, studied, and worked in China. I worked for McKinsey & Company in Shanghai during my first year in university. Did an internship there. Really looking at the role of technology in helping Chinese also engage with McKinsey companies in South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, where I traveled, to really understand what is needed then to build African companies and where the opportunities to connect that with China. And then in my final year, I will return back to Beijing and join Hope Investment Management, which is a Chinese private equity firm, trying to help them find opportunities in the African continent. So these are the kind of experiences that I had with regards to China. And while I was working and being in China, something started dawning on me, is that if I really want to have an impact in China-Africa relations, I really need to understand the conceptual foundation of Chinese thought. Who are the Chinese people? How do they think? How do they see the world? And when I was working in private equity in China, I realized that we will go for meetings to meet clients, and the Chinese are very particular. They pay so much attention to symbols and signs, like how do you take chairs, like you have to lower your glass. And I didn't understand that as a foreigner. So I wanted to really understand all of that. And I said, the only way in which I can do that is take a step back and really immerse myself into the literature of understanding the Chinese history, the Chinese tradition, the conceptual foundation of Chinese thought. And I couldn't find any other institution in China that could have given me that interdisciplinary approach to what I was looking for. And that is why Yenching was the best for me, because at Yenching, I had an opportunity to take classes in economics and management, take classes in politics and international relations, in philosophy and religions. I also took classes in their schools, in Guangzhou School of Management, took classes like management of multinational corporations in China. How do an outsider manage companies in China? How do international trade, like the economic thinking of Chinese entrepreneurs? I took classes such as Chinese worldviews, Chinese classics and thoughts. And it's been really, really fascinating for me, and I really enjoyed my time at school. Even though I was able to be in China just for the first semester, the fall semester, and I've been unable to spend the second semester in China, it's been really, really interesting for me just to continue reading more, engaging with my professors, asking them questions, asking them for guidance about books to read, what I need to understand. Actually, even Dr. Haas recommended a book last year, which was an anatomy of Chinese idioms, the idiom metaphor in politics, which was really, really interesting read by Perry Link, and I highly recommend that book to anyone interested. And now I'm writing my thesis with the supervision of Professor Roger Ames, which is, does Confucianism encourage despotism? Where I'm really analyzing 3 terms, the concept of harmony, hierarchy, and loyalty in the Confucian tradition. The reason why I ended up in a topic like this, does Confucianism encourage despotism, is because when I was trying to really understand the foundation of Chinese thought, and when I was reading through a lot of articles in the media about the rise of Confucianism or the revival of Confucianism today, there was this kind of notion that it is being used to encourage like loyalty to the ruler and all of this question. And I was really curious to say, what does Confucianism is all about? And I've been fortunate to spend over the past 6 months working with Professor Roger T. Ames, analyzing Confucian texts about this topic. And it's been really, really interesting with regards to that. And I want to share more about my experience about how to apply to Yenching program and how best can you position yourself. Of course, a lot have already been said today. But I think it's very important to realize that you don't necessarily have to study Chinese before, because some of the people that I talk to encourage them to apply to the Yenching program. They say, oh, sorry, Sandile, I haven't studied Chinese before, or I don't have any background in anything that's related to China. I've not worked in China, or I have not volunteered in China. That's still fine. You can apply to that. Actually, there are other students who don't have my profile of working in China, or all of that. Some of people were the first time being in China, first time studying Chinese. But what is very important, like what Jacob said and my other colleagues said, is that you need to really articulate why do you want to study in China, and why China now, and why particularly the Yenching program, and why you. Because also remember that what Michael said is that the program is made by the people, the students. So what do you bring to the program that will make you ideal for the program? So I want to just say that the beauty of the Yenching program is the ability for you to take classes across interdisciplinary. Take classes in philosophy track, go visit other classes, audit other classes. That's the really beauty, and what makes you have a kind of a holistic understanding of the things that move China. Because you won't be able, in my point of view, you won't be able to get an idea of what makes China such a complex society function and evolve if you just follow on one particular track. So if you can be able to study, immerse yourself in China and transition and understand all of that, take some classes in economics and management track, and also, take classes in philosophy. I think that's when you'll be able then to say, oh wow, these are some of the things that I've learned during my time in China, and take advantage of the opportunities as well that will be there, like the research grant, the field trips that you'll be taking. And also, the most important part is to really immerse yourself in the community, because everyone is fascinating. Jacob is my neighbor, for example. Every time he loves coffee, and so every time I just go and visit his room, he will be talking more about art and paintings and all of that. And that's where you start developing a really beautiful perspective about China. What is China? How best can you understand China? Participate in the activities happening in China. So that's all that I can share about my story, is that you really need to communicate why you and what you want to get out of the program, and why China now, and why the program specifically, not other programs in China. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sandile. I hope that you can see that from the 3 different presenters we've had tonight, that we're not a one-size-fits-all program, and there isn't a single kind of academic background or professional or internship background that we're looking for. Since Sandile mentioned it, I just have to give a plug to one of my favorite books about the Chinese language and Chinese culture ever, Perry Link's book, Anatomy of Chinese Rhythm, Metaphor, Politics. If you are an intermediate or advanced learner of the Chinese language, please do yourself a favor and get this book. I've read it several times, and I've been studying Chinese for over 20 years, and it is just a brilliant, brilliant piece of scholarship. So I wanted to just got to plug Professor Link's book there again. So that is the end of the presentations that we have now. Now I'd like to go through some of the questions that we have in Q&A. So to be respectful of the Yenching Scholars' time, instead of going in the order in which they were received, there were a couple of questions that was directed. Oh, it looks like maybe Jacob has answered one of them. Well, since that's happened, then I'm going to go in order that these questions were received. I'll answer the question first, and then I will open up the floor to see if any of the Yenching scholars would like to add anything to my answer. So on the first question, received at 8:54 p.m., as an international applicant, am I allowed to finish the program even if my GPA is not enough to receive the second-year fellowship? In this case, what kind of expense should I be expected to cover? Okay, very practical question. First off, we expect you to meet our academic standards at the end of the first year. So, you know, we can talk about this, but you should be planning for obviously meeting all of our academic standards. So if you perhaps don't meet our minimum GPA requirements, or you don't complete 31 academic credits in the first year, or if you fail one of the core required courses, then you will be expected to pay for all of your living expenses in the second year, including your tuition. I want to say that at one semester's tuition at, well, it's around 30,000 renminbi a semester, something along those lines. But then you also have to think about your living expenses and everything. So let's not dwell too much on this, because the goal is to certainly meet our academic standards in the first year. So I appreciate the practicality of your question, but let's certainly not plan for that. Okay, another question coming in at 9:01 p.m. and a message to the Yenching scholars who are on here. Let's not mention anyone's name when we're responding to questions, just because we don't necessarily have permission from them to share their name. So don't address anyone's name. So what happens if my previous internship or work experience does not revolve around the research area I'm applying for? This person's coming from an economics background. For example, how would an entrepreneurial humanity initiative, Women Overseas Protection Program under Sustainable Development, that I recently engaged in, help with my application for humanities studies? Good question. So first off, you definitely want to put all related internship experience or work experience on your CV. I believe there's also in our online application some sections where you're supposed to fill in internships, actually online. I think so. So we'd like to see that because you don't have to only have experience or training in the research area that you're focused on. Now, it might not be something that we would ask you about if you're invited for an interview, but it might be, because we're also looking to understand you as an entire individual. And I think something that we might be interested in is why you chose that internship opportunity. What was it about, entrepreneurship and the protection of women overseas that made you interested, made you passionate, and wanted you to devote some of your, precious time to that engagement? So I think that might be a good strategy if you chose to talk about that in your personal statement, or if you were asked about something like that in an interview, should you be asked to do an interview. Not everyone, it's very, very rare indeed that someone perhaps coming from a bachelor's degree has a 100% clear track in all of the courses he or she took and in all of the internship experiences that they might have. So please don't think that we are expecting to see a single straight line path from first year and university to the research area that you're planning to apply for. So I think that as long as you are prepared to tell us, if asked, what that internship meant to you, what you learned from it, and how you might be able to take some experience or some wisdom or some lessons from it and apply it to your graduate study, I think that should be enough. Gentlemen, anything that you would like to add to that? All right, well, I guess that was the perfect answer to a question. Obviously, I'm being facetious there. Okay, the next question came in at 9:12 p.m. And I think I'm going to take this one, and I welcome the Yenching scholars to share anything, although they did not have to write the research proposal when they applied. But let me tell you a little bit about the research proposal, and I'll start off by giving you some background. Before we had this research proposal in the application requirements, all applicants had 750 words in which to talk about their undergraduate training, their interest in YCA specifically, their career goals, what they hope to study here, and any sort of extracurricular activities or defining personal traits that they might be able to use to contribute to our community. It's very, very hard to do a good job with all of that in 750 words. Now, that's part of the challenge of having a small word limit, to try to get in so many things in a convincing and well-written and logical manner. but it ended up where we would almost always have in our interviews a standard question that was, do you have any topics that you might potentially want to explore for your master's thesis research? And then the interviewee would answer that generally superficially, and then we'd have to ask follow-up questions to probe a little bit more and really get to a engaging and enriching academic discussion. So we thought that it was a good strategy to separate these two, to have the personal introduction in your personal statement, and then have the research proposal as a kind of academic research introduction to us. So that's the background for it. The motivation is to learn how you conceptualize, analyze, and write about a topic of academic interest to you. And the goal is also to allow us to engage with your writing on a potential research topic in the application review stage, so that should you be invited for an interview, we can sort of skip the superficial, do you have a project that you might want to blah, 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 and try to dig in a little bit deeper and have a more fulfilling discussion and get to know you as a young scholar a little bit better. So that's the background and the goal. Now, this is potentially going to be a frustrating answer. We don't have an exact standard for what we're looking for your research proposal. This is a chance for you to tell us what you're fascinated in, what you're interested in, why you're interested in it, and how you maybe want to try to take your interest, narrow it down into a series of questions or a topic or a problem that you want to probe, and sort of what you think you might want to do at YCA. Now remember, I've said this multiple times, but there isn't a single profile we're looking for. So let's say when Michael applied, he had already been studying Chinese history, Chinese language, sort of knew, had a pretty clear path. His research proposal, if he had to write one, would probably be very different from Sandile's research proposal, because it was just a different kind of background, a different kind of training, and of course, understandably, a different set of interests. That's okay. There is not one single one. This is not a paper proposal for a conference, academic conference in China studies, where you need to define the topic, review all of the relevant literature, and say exactly where you are making an intervention and a contribution. Now, if you have that and you choose to do that, that's fine. We're happy to read that. But most of our scholars or applicants are coming out of undergraduate. They are not yet graduate students. This is sort of what your plan is and what you're thinking about and what you want to focus on potentially as a graduate student. So you want to try to balance two different things. One, what your interest is, maybe how you are prepared to try to address how to fulfill those interests and address those questions. So it's your interest, your passion, and also show us what you know to whatever level that is. So there really isn't one specific standard. If you have, let's say Sandile was writing and I had introduced that book to him, a couple of years ago. And he'd mentioned, this is what I'm interested in, China and Africa, very important relationship. I'm coming from a business track, but I read this book and it blew my mind. It made me realize I can't be effective in my career if I'm only approaching the Sino-African, multifarious relationship from a business and economics perspective. I want to dig deeper. This book made me think about these questions, and those are some of the things that I hope to explore at Yenching Academy. So there really isn't one size fits all, but it is show us your creativity, show us your passion, show us your training, and tell us what you hope to answer. So I hope that's useful. But that's really the best that I can tell you right now. Gentlemen, is there any advice you have if you were writing that kind of research proposal when you applied?
I have a quick question to you now. In the personal statement, which is 750 words, where you're supposed to articulate your motivation for applying to Yenching, how would you then how would you separate that particular part of your personal statement about why applying to Yenching and the research proposal?
Good question. I'm not trying to be evasive, but again, there isn't a single formula for success on this. The best kinds of application packages are ones that are connected. You know, your CV, your academic transcript, your personal statement that talks about who you are, why you want to come to China, where you want to go in your career, and how we'll help you get there, then sort of blend seamlessly into another form, and that is digging into what you hope to study, you know, a little bit more in more detail, more academic detail in the research statement. So you know, think of it as one entire application package. And you know, let's say if someone is already pretty focused in China studies in their undergraduate work, then perhaps their research proposal could be a lot more detailed and a lot more targeted into, I'm influenced by these three scholars and these three approaches, and I'd like to, you know, look at one of these approaches and try to work with a Peking University professor whose research I'm slightly familiar with. Great. Or if you're someone who maybe has a law degree or has worked for a couple of years in international development, then your research proposal won't be as necessarily focused on the books and the methodologies and the theoretical approaches that are interesting to you. But you know, your personal statement might be, this is how I prepared myself, you know, this is the path I've taken to get to my interest in China. And then say your research proposal might be, you know, in my undergraduate degree in which I focused on anthropology, you know, these are the problems and questions I looked at in some work I did, say, in Latin America. And I found that this problem of economic development and cultural preservation to be really fascinating. I wonder how that applies to China. And these are the kinds of things that the questions that I might like to explore instead of in the Latin American context, in the China context. So there isn't a direct answer I can give you except to say, this is your chance to connect, you know, these two documents, these two essays are your chance to connect your personal experiences, your interest, your career goals with a little more detail on what you're curious about and what you hope to dig into academically while you're here at YCA. Please think about it as an opportunity to tell us who you are as a person and who you want to be as a scholar. I hope that was inspirational, if not as informative as perhaps some of you would like it to be. Okay, a question that came in at 9:29. Is that okay? Is there a big divide between students outside and inside YCA? Is it easy or common to make friends with people outside the YCA program? Maybe I should just open this one up to the Yenching Scholars.
I think I could talk a little bit about that. I think that upon arriving at PKU, I think it's a little hard to like immediately reach out beyond YCA, just because you are doing all of these like orientation events, taking all of these required courses at YCA. So I think in the first couple of weeks, it can be difficult, but I think that if you make a sustained effort throughout the, you know, fall or spring semester, I think that you'll find it just becomes easier and easier. And the way that I was able to meet people through the wider PKU campus was through taking classes, through going to these sort of like extracurricular events or like film screenings on campus, talking to Chinese students who weren't in Yenching, and then it all sort of like snowballs from there. So I think that yeah, it might seem a little difficult at first, but I think that if you make the effort, you'll just find more and more opportunities to meet people throughout the wider PKU community.
I would also add that there are many extracurricular activities at Peking University which you can join. I play soccer, for example. I'm part of the soccer team, so I usually go and play when I have time, and play with other students from the wider Peking University community. I'm also part of the hiking club at Peking University. I'm also, because I was taking classes at Guanghua, so they were doing like group projects, and I end up building relationships with the MBA students at Guanghua, and then they invite you to their programs, extracurricular programs. And like I was part of the investment banking and private equity group, where they will organize dinners and seminars, and I will attend that. So it's, I would say in the beginning, of course, it might be very hard, but after a month or so, and then you start moving around, you will easily make friends with other people. I won't say it's very hard. And when you start exploring Beijing, so you'll find other communities outside Peking University. And then very soon you'll find that, oh, I don't want to be staying inside the campus all the time. There's much more to explore. You want to visit the hutongs, you want to have dinner outside. You know, it's going to be very interesting.
And I think one other piece of this is just, it depends on just how intentional you are with your actions. So if you are only going to Sanlitun or only going to Dongcheng, you're probably going to be running in expat circles, and it'll feel at the beginning like I'm in this cosmopolitan environment. I'm really getting to know Beijing, but then you look around and you're not really interacting with Chinese people. You're mostly interacting with expats. And so I think one of the great things about the advisor system is like my advisor is not a YCA professor, he's a PKU professor. And he, like, as soon as we like matched, he put me in his like advisor group chat. He invited me to his like reading sessions with his students. He treated me like another one of his students. And so that was a really great opportunity to kind of like burst the YCA bubble.
Excellent points, guys. I really appreciate that. I would like to echo a couple of things. Michael's point about intentionality is very, very important. In some ways, it's up to you how much you want to engage and integrate with the broader student community and the Chinese student community at Peking University. If you put in the effort, if it's something you're interested in, you can certainly do that. Now, we have structured a program, especially, not only curricular, by getting you into other PKU classes and having PKU professors be your advisors and the doors that can open and the introductions that can lead to. But also, if there is if Yenching scholars come to our administration and student affairs and want to set up a club, or they want to set up an activity or event under YCA's umbrella, and there's already one of those at PKU, we say, actually, no, don't set up your own YCA organization or event. Here's how you get in touch with this other PKU student community or PKU club or PKU event. And so we try to be door openers and guides to point you in the direction so that you can join those communities. I mean, you can, if you choose to, fulfill your academic and social, make your academic and social lives be fully ensconced in Yenching Academy, and it's still going to be awesome. I mean, you're meeting people from all over the world, and it's a really cool, tight-knit community of very, very impressive and interesting young people. But boy, that's a shame if you just do that. I discourage you from just doing that. But we're a platform. There's not just one experience for all Yenching scholars. So I think that, and there was a question I think was already answered in the Q&A about, can you have an advisor who's not a YCA professor? Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of faculty and thesis advisors are not directly associated with the Yenching Academy, except that they have worked with us for many years, and we have just under 200 PKU professors, and I would probably say 180 of them or something like that are not directly associated with the Yenching Academy, but they tell us how many spots they have, and they have been advisors for YCA scholars before, and then you worked with them to become their advisee. Okay. What are the internship opportunities for language and literature scholars? I know of several literary communities and publications in Beijing. Spittoon is the first one that comes to mind. There are these kinds of sort of literary and cultural related organizations and NGOs and nonprofits and just sort of collectives in Beijing that you could potentially have an internship with. There are potentially publication houses, literary journals. But, again, I don't know of a specific one that would fit. And I think internship isn't necessarily have to be exactly what you're studying. There are research assistantships available also at Peking University. So you could perhaps join a research team with a professor here as well. Guys, do you know of any, literature and culture directly related internship opportunities or experiences that you or other Yenching scholars had?
One that comes to mind is before I decided to kind of take the second year back in the US, I was going to be working at the National Museum just as like a part of their history, translating some of their texts into English and all of that. And so a lot of the museums in Beijing have positions for students, especially coming from PKU. You say that name and they're just like, great, come on in. And then PKU itself has some phenomenal museums on campus and some phenomenal archives that you can get like student positions within.
I think one of the things I can say is go back to Michael's point about being intentional and also using the opportunity that you are a Peking University student and you are in Beijing. So if you really want to explore opportunities in literature, I would say that be intentional about it and network, travel around, meet other people, and that's how you will be able to create more opportunities. But if you would just say, can Yenching give me opportunities in literature, it might be difficult. I've seen some of my classmates, one of my classmates is interested in security issues, for example. And since we arrived, he's been really focusing in that area to try and see how can he play a role in China-Africa security issues. And he's been attending seminars, conferences, and in the process, he's been able to create more opportunities for himself in doing so. So it's the idea of being very intentional and networking beyond just the Peking community.
I think that's a very good point. Also remember that you can't have an internship in your first year. So you have a lot of time to, get out and join events, go to poetry readings, go to art galleries, museums, and just sort of explore those fields and the diversity of events that are happening, not only at the university, but also in Beijing, and, see where that leads you. Jacob, I think you had something to add?
I was just gonna say that apart from the sort of like national museums and stuff as well, there's a lot of sort of like smaller private sector opportunities as well. This summer, I was setting up an internship with an art gallery in Beijing, but then it sort of became obvious that I couldn't return. But I was able to make that connection just through meeting people outside of campus and sort of networking with people in the art world. So yeah, I think going back to what you and Sandile were saying, being intentional about going to events outside of campus, meeting new people, exploring the opportunities in Beijing for yourself, I think is incredibly helpful for finding research or internship opportunities.
All right, thank you very much for that, guys. So we're getting to 10:15 now. I think we have one question that is directly related or directly asked to the Yenching scholars. Why don't we do that first in case you might need to leave? I'll stick around for a little bit longer. So can I ask how Yenching scholars decide to choose their specific concentrations? I am a dual degree major in international studies with a concentration in culture and politics and fashion design. Wow, that's a pretty cool, pretty interesting concentration. I hope to combine these two fields of study into a historical analysis of fashion as a symbol of national identity during the Reform and opening period, but I'm unsure which concentration this would fall under. Cool.
So for me, in undergrad studied Chinese history. I wrote my thesis on Chinese history. So it was kind of logical for me to continue the study of Chinese history. But that doesn't mean that, like, as I said, my thesis, it combines elements from different departments. And like, first and foremost, I think of it as a China studies thesis that then is being supervised by a history professor. And so I had one of my really close friends who she does like international relations stuff, but she really hit it off with a professor who is in the law and society like umbrella. And so because that working relationship was really strong, she did her thesis. Technically, he's a demographics professor, but she was able to kind of branch a few different interests together into one. So.
And yeah, I think my experience was also, I had a dual degree in philosophy and then East Asian studies, where I was taking a lot of like art and literature courses. And so when I got to Yenching, I thought I would have to make this tough decision between the philosophy track and the literature and culture track. And then, yeah, like Michael was saying, I realized I could very easily just combine elements of both into not only my first year curriculum, but into my thesis. And so now my thesis is in the literature and culture track, but it's mostly a philosophy paper. And I'm working with a faculty member who does both philosophy and art. So I think it's very easy to accommodate sort of these like multifaceted academic interests.
I would also say that before joining Yenching, I never thought I would study Chinese philosophy. I come from a business management undergraduate. I had an undergraduate in business management. I worked in management consulting and in private equity. And I never thought I would study Chinese philosophy. And when I was, during my first 2 months, I was just going to focus on economics and management. But as I was taking these different classes at Peking University, at Yenching in economics and in politics, I started to become very curious about where the Chinese culture. I was more interested about Chinese culture. I was more interested about the rituals, the habits, why the Chinese people do certain things, about the changes, right, the sayings. And I decided, actually, I think the answer to what I'm looking for will lies towards the philosophy track, not necessarily the economics and management track. So I think one of the things I would encourage you, even though you have these very specific kind of interests that you want to explore at Yenching, if you get in, I would say that go there with an open mind to experience the entire package that the courses will offer. And you'll be surprised that you might not end up taking a certain direction that you wanted to go into and then taking another one. I know a lot of my classmates, they started a program at Yenching with a specific track that they wanted to focus on, and during the course of the year, and then end up changing to another concentration. It's just the beauty of taking an interdisciplinary, being in an interdisciplinary program, because you're picking from different experiences and it ended up shaping your perspective and then boiling down to what you want to study at the end of the day.
Thank you all for that, gentlemen. I think the easy answer to her question is that literature and culture seems like the pretty logical application, or the logical research area in her application, but you can play with that a lot. You know, culture, interested in fashion, national identity with a side of politics, you know, to bring that in. And it also depends on which professor you end up working with. And I think if a scholar thinks they might potentially be interested in switching their research concentration, that is possible after you're accepted. We now have a new process of application to switch the research area in the first year. And I'll give you a little bit of information on that and some advice. So you must apply to switch your research area during your first year. And we will evaluate a few things. One, you have to find a thesis advisor in that research area who agrees to advise you. That's the most basic one. You can't switch from literature and culture to politics and international relations if there isn't a professor in politics and international relations who's interested in being your advisor. So that's one. But just having a professor in the field into which you want to switch agree to be your advisor is not enough. You must also have another faculty member in that field basically say, yeah, this student has sufficient training, and I think they will be able to conduct research at the master's level at Peking University in this field. So this is a new requirement that we're adding, but it's not just trying to put up obstacles in front of you to make it harder. The goal is to force you to more broadly network and interact with faculty members in the field that you're hoping to switch into. So it's setting you up, we think, for the highest chance of success of being able to produce a master's thesis that can be defended and successfully pass, you know, according to PKU's very stringent standards. And then finally, we're going to reevaluate your academic record, including undergraduate or any other graduate programs you may have attended, and including your time at Yenching Academy. So, you know, if you, let's say, if you have your politics, culture, and fashion undergraduate degree, and you decided that you're more interested in the economics of fashion and how that is connected to class and connected to, maybe it's connected to economic or class identity as opposed to national identity in Reform era China, and you're trying to switch into economics and management. Well, then we're going to be looking, well, has this applicant ever taken any courses in economics, macro, micro? Have they taken maybe something more on the management side or organizational theory or marketing? You know, has this applicant taken any courses that would suggest that they can be successful at the graduate level conducting research? And that will include Yenching Academy and Peking University courses. So not only do we, you know, you're not only able to take courses outside of your initially defined research area, you should do it because it's interesting, but also if you think you might want to switch, then the strategy is in your first and second semester at Yenching Academy, take some courses in that field so that you're already increasing your academic record on that, just in case you end up wanting to switch. Okay, question about resumes. Should we tailor our resume to the field of study we want to pursue at Yenching? You can, but it also depends on, I guess, how much you have on your resume. You know, I mean, if we don't want to see summer jobs when you were in high school. You know, we want to see what you did in your undergraduate, any other graduate work you've done, any interesting internship experiences you've had, any papers you've written, conferences you've attended, community service you've done, that kind of thing. If you think that there is enough to choose from, that some things don't need to go on there, that's okay. But again, we're not expecting that your undergraduate education and all of your internship or professional experience is going to be an easily identifiable straight line to literature and culture concentration at Yenching Academy. So if you think it's necessary, you can, but I don't, you know, it's hard to answer that specifically without looking at it. What I would really suggest is that you go to, if you're a university, has, say, a fellowships advisor or a career services advisor, or you could go to the faculty members who are going to be writing your letters of recommendation. And if they have the time and are willing, and I hope they are, have them look over your personal statement, your research statement, your CV or your resume, to have a sort of, faculty or professional fellowship advisor's eye. Or if there's just another mentor that you have, either at the university or wherever, reach out to whoever is willing to give you advice that you trust. It's always good to have someone a little older than you, a little more experienced, perhaps if they're academic, to look over these kinds of things, to just give you a fresh set of eyes. Also, it's always a good idea to have your personal statement, your research statement, and your CV or resume available for anyone who's writing your letters of recommendation. You should give that to them, because it makes it easier for them to look over what you've done when they're writing the letter of recommendation, and they hopefully will say, oh, I have a few pointers for you on this essay.
Also, I'd like to add that also remember that one of the things that makes the Yenching program very interesting or unique is the people in the program. So it's also important to use your resume to show what else do you bring into the program, because if you only focus talking about your concentration, you might be missing other points. For example, if you play certain music or you've traveled to certain places, all of that will also enrich your profile of who you are as a person.
I'm muted. Okay. On the official web, this is the last question. No more. We're already almost at 10:30. On the official website, there is very limited information about YCA's faculty. Where can I get to know in detail about the faculty and also about their published books, if any? Okay. So we have faculty members on our website, but I think to see more of their, research output, you might need to click through if there are links to their PKU faculty bio, or find their name and their department, and then Google or Baidu or go to the PKU website. Most of the departments at PKU also have English websites, if you're not able to read the Chinese website. But if you're not seeing what you need to see on the YCA website, take the faculty member's name and go to their associated department. Guys, do you have any pointers about learning about YCA and PKU faculty in the application process?
I think, yeah, what you just said is really great advice. I remember seeing Dean Pengfeng's limited profile, and then I searched for him on PKU's website and through Google, and I came up with a lot more information. So yeah, you may just need to search for the names that you're interested in, either through the PKU website or through Google.
I would say though, I didn't know any of the faculty before applying. For me, that seems like more of a PhD. I've seen some questions about, do I need to know who my thesis advisor is before? Do I need to get in contact with professors before? I had no idea of any faculty members. I more kind of knew just coursework, general concentration, characteristics of the different concentrations. So if you're sitting there thinking oh my gosh, I'm behind the curve, you're definitely not.
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. I mean, don't force it. If you look through and you find someone whose work you're really interested in, great. Then mention it. But you don't have to go and read multiple professors' entire research output, their entire bibliography, likely in Chinese, and then comment on articles in your research proposal. If you find someone whose work you're interested in, if you know them beforehand, or if you just look through and say, I could see you doing something along the lines of, here's what I've studied before, it's what I'm interested. These are some topics, or a topic that I maybe want to explore for my master's thesis research. And I've been really impressed by Professor Zhang's work and Professor Li's work in these two departments. I would want to explore the possibility of working with them. That would be good. Now, if you are really, really focused in one area and a PKU professor whose work you've actually read, well, cool, definitely tell us that. But that's not the sort of minimum standard requirement for admission. Okay, Jacob, Michael, Sandile, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. It's been great seeing all of you. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is the fourth and final of our open information sessions with focuses on individual or groups of research areas at the Yenching Academy of Peking University. Application deadline, December 4th, 2020, high noon Beijing time. Look forward to seeing as many applications from all of you as possible. Good luck to you. Stay safe and have a great day or a great night. Now, thank you, gentlemen, and I'm signing off from Beijing. See you later.